We're welcoming June this week and all that comes with it. Mild weather, the end of the school year, wedding season, and Pride festivities. Coming up on this episode of The Eagle, we'll go over the week's top headlines.
If you squint, you can imagine that this is in fact what Troy looked like back in its days of industrial glory.
We'll discuss Governor Andrew Cuomo's refusal to release records related to his $5.1 million book deal.
I feel like this is a story I've written about 20 times over the years in some way, shape, or form.
We'll hear about what it's like inside the new Amazon fulfillment center in Schodack.
A fulfillment center is basically a warehouse on steroids.
And we'll learn about the return of the Papscony Island Nature Preserve to the Stockbridge-Munsee band of Mohican Indians.
Our tribe is one of the most important historical sites in our homelands.
This is The Eagle, a Times Union podcast, a look inside our newsroom. I'm Jessica Marshall.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring in you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union member today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome to The Eagle. I'm Jessica Marshall. First up, let's go over what appeared this week in the Times Union and on timesunion.com. We are here now once again with Times Union editor Casey Seiler. Let's go over the top headlines, and we'll start with coronavirus. The totals, the positivity rate, they're all getting lower. Can you give us a summary?
They're getting lower as they are across the state. Governor Cuomo this week said that the state's 7-day positivity rate is down at 0.64, which is a new low, the lowest in the country this week, as the governor noted. But closer to home, there was very bad news. In one day, our Bethany Bump reported there were 4 more fatalities, 1 in each of the capital region's 4 core counties. The reported ages, one of the 4 wasn't known, but ranged from 50 to 75. And we are, of course, continuing to hear about people who are battling the knock-on effects of COVID even months later. So as everything opens up, it's a reminder that this story is very much not over. It's not over for those who have suffered from COVID, and it's not over in terms of new infections because, of course, the state's vaccination rate is amping up, but it's not yet where it needs to be.
Now, staying with Cuomo for a minute here, he's got a couple of news items that we've covered this week, including a high-priced fundraiser, which might indicate another run in 2022, and a taxpayer-footed bill for the nursing home probe. Can you tell us more about those things?
Yes, to take those one by one, Chris Bragg, who wrote about both of these issues in our fine publication, noted that an invitation for what the governor's campaign is describing as a summer reception that's going to take place on June 29th somewhere in New York City comes with a price tag of $10,000 for an individual, or Jess, if you and I wanted to go, it would only be $15,000 for 2. It's an indication that the governor, continues to say that he is going to run for re-election. But of course, it's worth remembering that campaign funds can be used in the event of legal expenses, which leads us, as we've seen, for example, in the case of Joe Bruno, the former Senate Republican leader, who was able to draw on not only contributions from supporters, but also his own campaign fund to support his legal efforts. And of course, Joe Bruno was ultimately recompensed after he was acquitted after facing 2 federal corruption trials. But that might be getting ahead of ourselves in Cuomo's case. What is not getting ahead of ourselves is the fact that taxpayers will be on the hook for up to $2.5 million at this point in legal bills that the executive chamber is dealing with, resulting from the federal investigation into Cuomo's handling of COVID deaths in nursing homes and the stonewalling, the suppression of data reflecting the scope of the calamity in nursing homes. This is, of course, it's state law when there's an investigation that involves one's public duty, whether you are a low level staffer or the governor, or in this case lots of Cuomo aides. Taxpayers pick up the legal bill. The legal bill here for the firm Morvillo Abramowitz is rather pricey. Elkin Abramowitz, who's a partner at the firm, is going to get more than $900 an hour, which is described as a significantly discounted rate from the firm's usual price tag. Obviously, it's drawn a lot of criticism from those who point out that Cuomo stands to make more than $5 million from American Crisis' COVID memoir. The taxpayers are going to be on the hook for his legal defense in this criminal probe, or potential in this federal probe, I should say. It's not yet identified as a criminal probe.
Now, you did briefly mention American Crisis there. We will have more from Chris Bragg coming up later in the show on that very topic. But let's go back to headlines here. And a former police officer in Amsterdam, who is Black, is alleging a racist and hostile workplace in a lawsuit. Reporter Paul Nelson was on that. Can you tell us more about that?
Right. Alan Drake was a 12-year veteran of the Amsterdam police force, and he says in a newly filed federal lawsuit that he endured hostility, that he was scapegoated for anything that went wrong in the department, that he was referred to as hot chocolate, and that he was subjected to displays of, white supremacist iconography, neo-Nazi symbols, you name it. Amsterdam is certainly a gritty city that is definitely up against it. There have been allegations that white supremacist organizations are active in that region, which is, of course, just west of Albany. It's very, very disturbing, obviously, and Drake says that he got very little in the way of support, not only from the police force, but also from city leaders up to and including the mayor.
All right, more on that on timesunion.com. The Canadian border moving north, still closed, but our senior senator and Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, was up in the region this week, and he talked about feeling kind of positive that might change soon. Can you tell us more?
Chuck Schumer said that he was beginning to see some progress, at least on the part of average Canadian citizens who want to see the border reopened. That would be significant because it is thought that the feelings of the general public who are resistant to seeing the border opened until COVID has receded even further are seen as being key, especially because Canada is coming into a political season in the fall. Obviously, anybody who has ever vacationed in Canada would like to see the border opened up again. Along, in the North Country and in the West, it's obviously a huge blow to the tourist economy that goods and services as well as visitors are not flowing back and forth. It's going to continue to be an issue until we can all go back up to Montreal again.
That would be fun. I love the food up there. All right, one final topic here. If you are happening to find yourself in downtown Troy this week, you might mistakenly think you've been transported back in time. What's going on down there?
The filming of HBO's The Gilded Age continues and is in fact ramping up, including night shoots that are drawing scores of local folks to eyeball just how much Troy's city center has been remade. Dirt has gone down on the streets. You're seeing new shop fronts advertising businesses that one would expect to see 130, 140 years ago. It's a remarkable transformation, and Troy residents and residents from across the capital region are really kind of getting into it. It's remarkable to see any movie filmed in your community. The level of effort that goes into these productions is really something. But the idea that this is a chance to see, of course, it's supposed to be New York City, not Troy, but if you squint, you can imagine that this is, in fact, what Troy looked like back in its days of industrial glory.
Now, we have some awesome pictures up on timesunion.com. Check them out. Casey, thank you so much for joining us. We will check back in with you next week.
Jess, good talking to you.
As always, you can read more about all the stories and issues that we discuss on this podcast at timesunion.com. Tax records released last month show that Governor Andrew Cuomo will earn $5.1 million for American Crisis. That's the book he penned last year at the height of his popularity. Since then, questions have arisen about who helped him write the book, namely his staffers, and whether their participation was in violation of state ethics laws. Ongoing investigations are looking into it. Times Union reporter Chris Bragg, however, has been digging into the details since the tax records came out. And this week, the governor's office denied his multiple requests for public information related to the book. I spoke to him to learn more about his investigation. You know, the headline kind of does the heavy lifting here. It says a lot. It says Cuomo refuses to release records related to his American Crisis book. Can you tell me more specifically, what did you find in this story?
Yeah, I feel like this is a story I've written about 20 times over the years in some way, shape, or form, sort of reflective of the administration's attitude towards providing public records, basically finding various reasons within the law to not provide records that are generally assumed to be public and accessible by people like reporters and others. So I asked for a few different things related to Governor Cuomo's book. It was recently revealed he earned over $5 million to write that. And there are questions about him using government staff to write the book. I asked for timesheets showing the work hours of a couple of high-ranking aides that did work on the book that would show whether they volunteered or not during appropriate times for that. The other two things I asked for were related to the approval of the book. So when Cuomo sought approval from the Joint Commission on Public Ethics, the state ethics regulator, he had to submit a letter asking for that approval. And that was recently provided by Cuomo's office to the media, but they're refusing to provide any other documents as part of that approval process. And they're also declining to provide any letters that Jacob sent to Cuomo's office, basically asking them questions for any investigations that might have begun because of this book issue.
Now, as you said, you've written about this 20 times before. It's not a new issue, but it does speak to the larger issue of, ethics and ethics reform and how the administration has handled that over the years. Can you give us a little bit of history or background there?
Yeah, when Cuomo ran for governor first in 2010, he promised to have the most transparent administration in history, something along those lines. I think it quickly became apparent to people who dealt with the administration that wasn't going to be the case, unless prior governors that I don't know about were even worse, which is would be a little bit hard to believe. But it often takes a year or two to get open records requests filled. Difficult to get a straight answer on basic questions from the press office. There's a long history of the media complaining about these kinds of practices, and they don't seem to be really changing as Cuomo is in this period of kind of scandal and trouble. They only seem to really be increasing at this point. So,
what led you to focus in on the book and getting information surrounding the book and what may or may not have transpired in the writing of the book? What kind of drew you to that?
Dating back for many years, back to Joe Bruno and the Sheldon Silver case and the Dean Skellos case, outside income earned by powerful people in Albany has always been an issue in terms of whether that conflicts with their government duties. So it's always interesting when an elected official earns a large amount, and this is a very large amount at $5 million. I don't think that particular conflict of interest issue is necessarily the main thing here, but there are two investigations going on. One, a federal investigation about the Cuomo administration potentially suppressing information about the number of nursing home deaths as this publishing deal was being finished. The point of the book was basically to tout how well Cuomo had done in response to the COVID pandemic. So, it's interesting to federal investigators that data was suppressed at that time. We'll see whether that results in anything. And then there's also an attorney general investigation into Cuomo's use of government staff on the book and whether that's a misuse of government resources for private gain. That's a much more simple kind of classic Albany investigation that, we'll see how that one proceeds as well. But, there's a lot of fronts that are interesting in terms of looking at just this book deal and how it came about in the middle of this very busy time for the administration, and the book's still getting written in a couple of months and out there to the public anyway.
Now, some of the folks that you spoke to about this had some pretty frank reactions. Can you talk about those?
Well, one of them was from a Jacob commissioner, Gary Levine. He has been a bit of an antagonist towards the Cuomo administration, but he's also sought to get information about the book deal. And, you would think that wouldn't be too much of a task as a state ethics commissioner who's responsible for overseeing those kinds of matters. But he has had trouble in the same way I had trouble getting additional information about the book deal beyond the very basic things. So he thought it was basically an absurd explanation that the Cuomo administration gave, that essentially they're saying that any record that the administration gives to Jacob becomes basically a secret document because Jacob itself is not subject to the open records law, which is interesting for a few reasons. But I think most of all that the Cuomo administration recently released a document to the media that fell into that exact classification. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency in terms of how they're applying the open records law, which is not exactly something new either.
So what's next? You're reporting on it. You've gotten all of these kind of, I guess, stone walls or dead ends. What comes next for you reporting on this?
There are definitely more stone walls to come, I think, in terms of other things I'm pursuing. In my opinion, those things, like I said, it can be a little bit of a broken record to keep writing about them, but I think it's important to, put the information out there if they're going to suppress information in that way, even though it's not as interesting probably a story as actually getting the information and writing an article. It does hold them accountable and apply some pressure. There are a bunch of other things going on. I've been writing a lot about the State Ethics Commission and how it's handling various things related to Cuomo. There's a really interesting dynamic there right now on the commission with people pushing back more against the governor than they typically have. So I think I have some things in the works related to all that's coming in the next few days.
Well, that is exciting. I can't wait. And we'll probably have you back on the podcast to talk about those things as well.
All right. Sounds good.
After the break, what's it like inside the massive Amazon fulfillment facility in Schodack? One of our reporters went inside.
Hi, I'm Casey Seiler, editor of the Times-Union. Join us for an ongoing discussion on major developments in the saga of Keith Raniere, co-founder of NXIVM, the shadowy upstate New York organization at the center of the explosive federal investigation that resulted in Raniere's conviction on charges of extortion, sex trafficking, and more. We talk to former members of NXIVM, discuss the latest news, and preview the likely next twists in this bizarre and disturbing story. You can find NXIVM on trial at timesunion.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. Amazon opened its first upstate New York fulfillment center in Schodack last fall. The 1 million square foot facility is designed to employ 1,000 workers who pack and ship items to customers across the region. Reporter Rick Carlin got the rare chance to tour the center this week, and I wanted to hear all about it. You had a very unique opportunity in that you were able to tour the Amazon fulfillment facility, the new one in the area. So tell me all about it.
Yes, it's in Schodack, New York, in Rensselaer County. It's right off of I-90, which is a key point. A fulfillment center is basically a warehouse on steroids, as it was described to me. They receive and hold all sorts of items that Amazon buyers are going to buy, and which will then be shipped out to the local warehouses, usually in those little blue vans that we're seeing all the time. This particular warehouse has some specifications. For instance, they don't handle clothing items, and they only handle items up to 50 pounds. Some of the things they have are Instapots, air fryers, flat screens, PlayStations, any number of things, bags of dog food, small rugs. It goes on and on.
When you first went in there, tell me, was that your impression? Were you like, wow, this is a warehouse on steroids?
It's just a big, open, cavernous room, a big, massive room that you could fit multiple football fields in. It's probably 40 feet high. There are windows around the top, but no windows on the sides. And there are these massive shelves, these metal shelves like you see in the Costco BJ type stores, but they just go all the way up to the ceiling. And there are people driving around these sort of high tech, hydrogen powered forklifts. And they go back and forth in these shelves all day. They pick items off of there. Then they bring them down to where they're boxed and shipped out. There's a certain logic to it.
Sure, I can imagine so.
Yeah,
Now, you talked a lot about the security, obviously, how
yeah.
it's a really like tightly controlled,
Uh-huh.
video cameras and, closed circuit TV and
Yeah.
all that stuff. But what about some of the other kind of technical aspects of it? You had mentioned in your article that robots were involved.
Some of the facilities are more robotic than this, but there's a machine, for instance, that will automatically custom make the box that you need. So there are all these piles of cardboard, raw cardboard sitting around with the Amazon logo on it. And you'll get the example they gave me, there was a roll of carpet that was about, oh, I don't know, 5 feet long by maybe a foot and a half wide. It was rolled up in a tube. Someone simply took a scanner, scanned the carpet, they got the dimensions of the carpet, they pushed a couple buttons on the computer screen, and this machine spits out a custom made box.
Wow.
And then the human work then is you put the carpet in the box, close up the box, and off it goes to the buyer. There's a lot of that sort of stuff. The forklifts are kind of interesting. They're hydrogen powered. If you're on the forklift, you just push a button, and all of a sudden you're lifted up to the upper shelves, 30 feet up, where you can grab the item you need. You put it on the forklift.
Yeah, I was
Now,
gonna say, you said something in your article about the forklift operator being strapped in.
yeah, I said, geez, it almost looks like this is space age. These guys have these wires or ropes coming out of their back, right up to the top of the forklift device. And they said, oh no, it's a safety harness.
Oh,
So
wow.
you wear it all day long when you're in the forklift, and so if you go up the 20 feet or the 30 feet, in case you were to fall, the safety harness would catch you.
You mentioned, and I've heard, in the media, how Amazon has been criticized recently
Yeah,
for its lack of attention to safety protocols. I mean, how did that
that
jive with
that
what you saw at the
yeah,
facility?
that's part of what I think the tour was. They're trying to show that, and I think they're honestly trying to address the safety, but they have been criticized. I think a lot of it is it's a fast-paced environment, and they expect their pickers and their sorters to be productive, to maintain a certain pace of work. They also have a 10-hour workday. They work 4 10s,
That's a long
and
day.
it's a long day, and they take breaks and everything, but I think that they try to keep people very busy. So there was a recent study in the Washington Post, which ironically is, as you probably know, is owned by Jeff Bezos, who also started and is the CEO of Amazon. But they did a story citing OSHA figures where the injury rate per certain man hour worked is almost twice that of Walmart.
Wow.
But they've had a high report of injuries, and they didn't get into the type of injuries, but I suspect a lot of it is repetitive stress. From loading boxes all day, stooping over, picking up boxes, picking up, lifting boxes, even if they're only 50 pounds. I spoke to one of the workers sitting outside on the picnic tables, and I think they're told they walk like 5 or 6 miles per day. Uh,
Wow.
One of the things that they wanted to show was the measures they're taking to prevent injuries. For instance, almost everything you do is you log on at a computer station somewhere, right? So if you're a sorter or a picker, each time you log on, you have to go through a mandated routine of stretching and calisthenic type activities and limbering up exercises. And you have to do that before the computer will let you go to work. They have an aid station where you can get, Tylenol, or they'll check you out if something starts to ache. So it sounds like they're trying.
What about COVID safety? Are they taking specific measures
Yeah,
to ensure COVID protocols?
yeah. They opened this facility opened during COVID, and one of the things I found interesting was they can track your movements, and all over the facility, all over the warehouse, are these large flat screens, and you see yourself on the flat screen from above. If you are less than 6 feet from another person, this big red circle will be around you on the flat screen,
Oh boy.
meaning that you're in the danger zone. You're too close. You're less than 6 feet from another person. So if you step back, it will turn yellow, and then it turns green when you're in the safe zone more than 6 feet away from another person. Now, they say that there's no sanctions or punishment with that. It's just a reminder, when you see yourself there and you're in that red circle, it's like, oh, I forgot. I'm 2 feet away from this person. I need to step back another 4 feet.
Absolutely. Now, last question. You had mentioned this earlier when you were talking about kind of describing the facility. You said that it could fit the entirety of Crossgates Mall in it.
That's what someone said. I checked it out, but it looks like at 1 million square feet, you could maybe squeeze most of Crossgates in there.
To see photos of the inside of the Amazon Fulfillment Center, go to timesunion.com. The 156-acre Papscony Island Nature Preserve lies on the eastern shore of the Hudson River. And as of last month, it's now in the hands of the Stockbridge-Munsee Community Band of Mohican Indians. The area is an important part of the ancestral homelands of the tribe, who until about 400 years ago grew corn and fished sturgeon from the Mohicanatuck, or the Hudson River as we know it today. The tribe turned it over to Kilian van Rensselaer and the Dutch West India Company in 1637. Bonnie Hartley is a historic preservation manager for the Stockbridge-Munsee. I spoke to her recently about the preserve and the significance of its return to the tribe. What does this land look like?
Yes, so Papscony Island Nature Preserve is the southern tip of Papscony Island, which was originally fully an island in the Mohicanatuck, or now known as Hudson River Valley or Hudson River. It's now, the island itself is attached to the mainland now. It's been filled in with, alluvial fills. And so it's, now it's not fully an island. But the northern half of the island is all heavily industrialized and has oil refineries all throughout. But the preserve is the, remaining place on the island that still retains the essential characteristics of the island when it was under Sachin Papscony's leadership as a sachem. You can still walk into the preserve today and still see, elements of what the island was like during that time period, which was 1630s when the land agreement was signed. But, so originally the entire island, and this is of which the preserve is just one portion, the southern tip, had cornfields from what we know. So it's, our ancestors domesticated corn, and there's still corn growing today. So some people have said that it's the oldest continuous cornfields in New York State, that have been, used continuously since Sachin Papscony's time. Throughout the island, you see a turtle pond. You have access to the Mohicanatuck or Hudson River. And from that vantage point, especially like from the southern tip of the island, you can really get a sense of the interconnectedness to other Mohican village sites throughout the area. So you can see into Bethlehem, to village sites we had there. It's interconnected with Schodack Island, which is the Mohican place of the council fire, to Peebles Island, all of these different, the shore of the river and the islands within it all make sense, really, from viewing it from Papsini Island and imagining, traveling that by the water. It's really, remarkable place and really historically significant place to our community. And we consider it a traditional cultural property for the thousands of years of continuous occupation on the islands. Through the archaeology, you can also see a major use of our ancestors who lived there in the village were gathering sturgeon. You see evidence of the sturgeon bones, of butternut squash being gathered, different, berries and things that were eaten there. You see the hearths where those were prepared. I mean, there's just really rich, archaeological evidence from the island that we've been able to learn from and add to our understanding of the place. So to our tribe is one of the most important historical sites in our homelands.
Can you go into a little bit more of the history of Sachin Papscini and, exactly what he represented and kind of the history there?
From the archaeology, we know that there's continuous Mohicans and Mohican ancestors going there for so many thousands of years. But I guess the name Papscini is what's recorded as being the head sachem at that time, who, was responsible for caretaking of all of the villages and all the families there at that time, and at contact with the Dutch in the 1600s. So when the land agreement was signed in the 1630s, as far as we're aware, Sachin Papscini wasn't alive at that time. It was his heirs that were signing the documents. But again, just because of his significance as being, he was recorded on the agreement and it was referred to as being Papscini's Island. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the significance is much larger than any one individual, but there's, again, thousands of years of history and Mohican families and ancestors living there that are, also very important. I guess it's just the name of Papscini has stuck as part of the island, which is kind of rare, to have the name still retained on the place that he lived.
Now, what are the plans for the land now?
From what I'm aware of, our agreement that our tribal council signed is to keep the land as it is in terms of it being open to the public as a nature preserve. And our Department of Cultural Affairs is working on signage throughout the island. So interpretive signage about the history onto the different trail systems that are there. And, more interpretive signage at the entrance, just describing both the history, but also our contemporary, connections to the island and how we, continue today in Wisconsin. We want to enhance the public's understanding of the cultural significance of the island, in addition to, the obvious environmental, beauty and everything of the island that people see when they go there. I think what currently is lost is, better interpreting and understanding the Mohican cultural significance and how it still is important to our community today, and how meaningful and proud we are to have that back, almost 400 years later.
That's great. Now, are there other plans for archaeological research to kind of dig more into the history there?
Yes, we have a partnership with the New York State Museum. And for the past few summers, we've worked on doing different archaeological digs throughout the island with their assistance. And a lot of it's been non-invasive work too, because we want to leave as much intact as we can. Mm-hmm. But we're working especially on the non-invasive techniques to try to identify, more sites throughout the island, and also to assess, which sites are more sensitive. So for example, if we can learn those, and those would help with future planning so that we can avoid any disturbance in those areas. But for our historic preservation office, I mean, there's constantly more developments that are planned, like, for example, the pipeline E37 that was proposed, which now is suspended at the moment. But there's constantly projects that are planned for just north of the preserve area. Mm-hmm. And, again, the significance of the island, its history extends beyond the preserve. I mean, it's the entire island. So I think that's something that's on our minds as well, is to be aware of future projects that might be outside of the boundaries of the land that we are stewarding now, but also, hopefully by having more of a presence there and raising more understanding of the cultural significance, might be helpful in that regard.
That's great. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about that, or about any of the other projects that you have going on?
I guess, I just would hope that people can understand how significant having this one part, the southern tip of the island still be intact, versus I think, if you go there and go down one of the main roads there, American Oil Road, I mean, it's full of oil refineries the entire way. So I think that's why Open Space Institute stepped in when they did to work to preserve that portion of it. So we're just so grateful that they did and have worked with us over the years now to get to this point and building a relationship and trust and everything to get to this point where it's returned. I think just pointing out that how rare and precious still having that one area of the island intact is. I think when people look at the preserve and just north of it, it might seem like a hot spot in a way of development because it might just look like fields or something that would be prime for development. But I hope that we can be part of raising greater appreciation and respect for the immense cultural significance that has always been there, and hope that more people beyond our own community as well can appreciate the cultural significance of the lands.
To read more about the Stockbridge-Munsee's acquisition of the Papscony Island Nature Preserve, read reporter Kenneth Crow's articles on timesunion.com. That's it for this week. I'm Jessica Marshall. We'll be back next week with another look inside the newsroom here at the Times-Union. In the meantime, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, or head over to timesunion.com for the latest news and features. The Eagle is a production of the Times-Union. It's produced and edited by me, Jessica Marshall, with help from the Times-Union digital team and the newsroom.